as Rav Kook tells us, to relate to the basic nature of what it means to be a Am Segula, the Am Hashem, for that to be able to come to fruition. That cannot happen if we are constantly engaged on a national level in the capitalistic pursuit of growth of the economy. It needs to have a pause. There needs to have a pause so that it doesn't become the defining midah of the nation, because that could become very destructive. The Jewish people, ultimately, we desperately want to be an Or LaGoyim, an Am Segula, Rachmanim, Baishanim, Goim LeChasadim. That's who we are. But we also want to grow and develop a nation and a culture and a country and a society that is going to inspire humanity. Very difficult to inspire humanity when you're on the bottom rung of society, so you need to be successful. That's the klal. Very hard to tell people that they should all believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and recognize the importance of being Avdei Hashem if the Avdei Hashem in the world are not Matzliach. That's a simple reality. Rabbi Stav told this to me. He said this in the name of the Ramban. I remember this when I was in Kerbi Avda. I haven't found this explicitly in the Ramban. So I'll say it, Stav, in the name of the Ramban. It's a tremendous ha'ara, nevertheless. Is you might notice that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts Avram through the ringer. Right? Avram Avinu goes through the ringer. He has 10 tests. One of those 10 tests of Avram Avinu, fascinatingly enough, is not poverty. Right? Avram Avinu is exceedingly wealthy. Avram Avinu goes through many, many, many difficult things. Right? From being thrown in furnaces to having to sacrifice his son, bring him up as a korban, to having his wife abducted. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen to Avram in his life. One of the things that does not happen to him is poverty, which is, throughout the generations, is one of the primary challenges of Klal Yisrael. What's pshat? Why? Well, mashallah mahadavadaime, right? This is more or less, if you would imagine like a guy on the corner of 42nd Street in New York City with a big sign that says, "The end of the world is coming." So, what do you say to him? Shkoyach, right? Shkoyach. Thank you. It's not today, thanks. Right? You don't take him seriously at all. Right? The Meshuggah on 42nd Street, yeah, look at him, okay. No, aside from the fact that he's living in New York, right? So you say to him, what are you doing? Warren Buffett gets up on national television and says the end of the world is coming, and everybody goes, "Ooh, Taka, I wonder what he's talking about. That's really interesting." Right? Two individuals saying exactly the same thing. One of them is homeless Meshuggah on 42nd Street. One of them is one of the world's wealthiest men. So you take the wealthy man seriously. If Avram Avinu is going to spread monotheism, he needs to do so from a position in which people are going to look at him and go, Taka, you might have a point. You might have a point. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu makes this point explicitly, that when Klal Yisrael will keep the mitzvahs and do the right things, so then everybody's going to go, wow, rak am chacham v'navan hagoy hagadol hazeh. Look at how smart and prosperous and successful these people are. So it's important to point out that poverty is not the ideal of the Jewish people, right? There was a machshava at one point in time in Europe that there's a midah in being poor. There is something to that. Not getting into the whole conversation, but as a klal, as a nation, the goal is to be wealthy and successful and prosperous. And I've made this point a couple of times to Chavra and Shul that, for a long time, Jews have always bring a kvittel to the Rebbe to ask for parnasa. Yes? Daven for parnasa, ask for parnasa. The Belzer Rebbe used to say, stop davening for parnasa, start davening for ashirus. You're a Jew. Don't daven that you have enough to eat. Daven to be wealthy. Be wealthy. There's nothing wrong with it. Right? Zaygabench, be wealthy. Why parnasa? No. Klal Yisrael is supposed to be wealthy. We're supposed to be wealthy. We're supposed to be healthy. We're supposed to be successful. We're supposed to be prosperous. We're supposed to be at the cutting edge of all technology and science and prosperity. That's what we're supposed to be. In order to do that, you need to engage in competition. Kina Seifrim, right? You need to have people that are competing for prestige and for honor and for grants and for the marketplace and for and market share and investors. Like, you need to have that. But that midah that also is so important within people in order to generate a healthy, growing economy is the same midah that makes people coarse and sometimes a little crass and a little bit angry and that's a bad idea. So how do we weigh between these two things? Says Rav Kook, that is what Shemitah achieves. Is that every 7 years, on a national level, there's like a 3 steps back from the heated competition of the normative growth of the economy. Pause, step back, focus on what it means to be an Am Hashem, to be an Am Segula. That's where we left off. Now, that's the Shabbos Ha'aretz. The relationship, of course, between Shabbos and Shemitah, both of them called Shabbos, as we are going to explore in a moment. Shabbos and Shemitah is that the same way that Shabbos, and this is the Tzad HaShaveh, this is the unifying common denominator between Shabbos and Shemitah, as Rav Kook understands it, is that in the same way that Shabbos provides us an opportunity on an individual level to return to the core of who we are as individuals, Shemitah allows us the capacity, the ability, the time, the possibility of taking a step back from the normative day-to-day operations of the country, of society, and then to engage in the loftier pursuits of our national identity and inherent spiritual culture. Take a look on, see it on page Vav, the second paragraph that begins with Uchashem. Page Vav, Uchashem. Rav Kook writes as follows. He says, Uchashem shenamar b'Shabbos Bereishis, the same way that it says by Shabbos Bereishis. That Shabbos Bereishis, not talking about the first Shabbos that the world existed, but the Shabbos Bereishis, the Shabbos of the 7 days of the week that coalesce into Shabbos Kodesh. It's referred to as Shabbos La Hashem, the Shabbos of Hashem. Kach nemar b'Shvius. So too, this is what the pasuk says about Shemitah. Shemitah is also called Shabbos LaHashem, and that's the pasuk in Vayikra in Parashas Bahar, where the Torah describes Shemitah as being Shabbos LaHashem. V'shavta ha'aretz Shabbos LaHashem, that the land is going to have a Shabbos. And Rav Kook explains, Skulas ha'aretz uskulas ha'uma mas'imos yachad. At this point in time, that which is unique and special about the nation and that which is unique and special about the land are now in sync, are now in tune with one another. Now, we haven't explored and explained yet what is unique about Eretz Yisrael. We spent a decent amount of time exploring that which is unique about Klal Yisrael. We spoke about the nation as a representative of the ideal of Adam. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates humanity. So with goals and aspirations of revealing Malchus Hashem in the world, that's what Adam is supposed to do. Humanity fails at this numerous times until HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, Avram Avinu, you're going to be the one that's going to do this thing. You're the one that's going to be in charge of this. You're going to start this grassroots movement of bringing all of humanity back to an understanding of what Adam is supposed to be. And that's the skula of Klal Yisrael, and that is our basic nature. Is that our life, as Rav Kook has explained, many, many different ways and from different angles so far, our inherent identity, the nature of who we are, is that our life is only meaningful in its ultimate sense when we are connected to Elokim Chaim. That's who we are. What is the nature of Eretz Yisrael? So that's something important to understand. We haven't developed that yet, and we're going to explain a little bit. Rav Kook is going to say a little bit of it, and we're going to explain a little bit outside as well. So, on the third line of that paragraph, he says like this. In the same way that the nation is unique to godly, transcendent exaltedness, at the depths and profundity of our basic life. So too Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Hashem, the land of Hashem, He machshira es ha'am hayoshev aleha benachalas olamim, is that which is a machshir, that which is an enabler, a platform upon which the nation that resides upon it can engage benachalas olamim, with the inheritance of eternity. We're going to define what that means in a moment. But he writes, Haba bivris uvishvua, that comes as a result of a bris, a covenant, uvishvua, and an oath, bebitchon netzach Yisrael, with the trust, with the confidence in the eternity of the Jewish people, which is also a name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rebbeinu Shalom is referred to as Netzach Yisrael, the eternity of Yisrael. Hamiyusad al hateva ha'eloki hakavua b'matbea eretz chemda nifla'ozu, that is part of the nature, the godly nature of this land, that is kavua, that is affixed b'matbea, as a currency, as a fixed form of identity of eretz chemda nifla'ozu, this beautiful land. Ha-mizuveges la'am zu, that is particularly connected and related to, like a zivug, for this nation, asher bachar loika liskulasei, that Hashem has chosen for its special purpose. These are some very lofty ideas. We need to define what some of this means. It begins with an understanding, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this here before, of the Hakdama of the Shalach HaKodesh to Sefer Vayikra. Did we learn that yet together? The Hakdama of the Shalach HaKodesh to Sefer Vayikra, we'll say it outside because it's a big piece of text. Huge but complex. The Shalach HaKodesh points out that once upon a time, all things, this is in Gan Eden, all things were Kodesh at the same degree. There was no such thing as a differentiation between Chol and Kodesh. All things were Kodesh. Everything was Kodesh. There was no such thing as Zmane Kedusha, times that were Kodesh. There were no such thing as people that were Kodesh, and there were no such thing as places that were Kodesh. Everything, right? Olam, Shana, and Nefesh, everything was Kodesh. Everything was Kodesh, means everything was accessible and relatable to the purpose of what it was supposed to be, connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, whenever we find the world of Kedusha, we pointed out that we also find the world of Isur. But Kedusha is something that is at least supposed to be, to a certain extent, palpable. It's something that a person is supposed to be able to connect to and feel and intuit to a certain degree because of its relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll give you a mashal. Mashal lema'ada v'daimeh. If something is, for example, particularly warm, so we have senses to be able to experience that thing that is warm, right? We feel heat. We feel heat radiating off of something that has warmth. It is possible, however, to conceal that heat, right? You can cover it up, you can insulate it. And then you won't feel the heat anymore. The more that you insulate it, the more that you will not be able to feel that heat anymore. And this is very practical and very important when you take hot things out of the oven, right? You put on oven gloves so that you don't get burnt. Because otherwise you would get burnt. It would be very hot, it would be too hot. It would be too hot for us to be able to withstand that heat. Kedusha operates likewise as something that is resonating throughout the Bria, something that is possible, that is permeating the Bria. And at certain times and in certain places and in certain people, the insulation is a little bit peeled off. It's more palpable. So there is the possibility on Shabbos Kodesh of feeling that Kedusha. It's possible to feel the Kedusha of Shabbos. And you see this is written throughout the Svarim that there is something different on Shabbos. And it might take a life of work to distance ourselves from the things that distract us from the Kedushas of Shabbos. Similarly, something that Shabbos, sometimes we don't feel so much, but there's certain times of the year that we taka do, right? Leil HaSeder, there's a unique Kedusha of Leil HaSeder that a person can feel. There is a unique Kedusha to Yom Kippur, and a further unique Kedusha to the Ne'ilah of Yom Kippur, the person feels that there's something different going on there. There is a unique Kedusha that exists in that time. You visit Eretz Yisrael, you feel that there is somewhat of a unique Kedusha there. In Yerushalayim, there is something more to that. Now, a person can create Kedusha. This is one of the most fascinating and unique things that the Torah tells us, is that a person can make something kodesh. One can create hekdesh, dedicate something to the Beis Hamikdash. Lahalacha, it can become kodesh. You can take a behemoth and say that this animal is going to be a korban, and it becomes kodesh. You can create kedusha there. Now, it would take a tremendous amount of sensitivity to the world of kedusha to be able to feel that thing that is kodesh that a person has created. But you can, meaning all the way from the loftiest levels of ruchnius down to the psychological and sentimental values of it. There's a certain, on a psychological level, there's a certain sentimental value to the siddur that your great-grandfather davened out of, right? There is a kedusha that exists in physical objects. That's possible. Now, by the way, what I'm saying is not out there in terms of Jewish philosophy and theology. The Ran in Drashas Haran explains that this is the value to Kivrei Tzadikim. The reason that people daven by Kivrei Tzadikim, by the graves of big Tzadikim, is because they made their guf into a kli, into a vessel of Kedusha in the world. So that place, those bones, become an Aron Kodesh. They carry Kedusha. It is for this reason the Gemara's Masechus Megillah, for example, describe that there is a Kedusha to a Sefer Torah, but there's also a Kedusha to the Bima. Why is the Kedusha to the Bima? Because that is the thing that you read the Torah on. So now it has held a place of Kedusha. So you can make something more Kodesh, which creates a Kedusha in halacha and creates a Kedusha psychologically, sentimental value, however you want to understand that. Expand to that not for now. What the Shla says at the beginning of Sefer Vayikra is that the entirety of the world and all people and all times were equally Kodesh. Once Chet enters into the world, so it no longer is that accessible to feel that Kedusha, to feel that lemashal warmth of Kedusha in all times, in all places, for all people. There is a distance between that. There is a distance between human beings and HaKadosh Baruch Hu that didn't exist before the world of sin is introduced. And therefore we feel that distance, or that distance is able to be appreciated in that we, as people, don't feel Kedusha in all times and all places and all people all the time. It is Ke'ilu, it's a little covered over. You understand what we're saying? Once upon a time, everything was Kodesh, and then there is this like slime that's poured over everything in the world. That's called Chet. And then in order to feel the inherent Kedusha that is underneath it, it takes time and takes work in order to be able to experience that. However, not everything is, if you would imagine that the world is just a flat plane, all times, all spaces, all people are exactly the same. So then, yeah, the sludge is covering everything equally, but that's not the case, says the Shla. There are peaks, right, in the topology of the world, in Olam Shana and Nefesh. So it means that there are points that the sludge is thinner, right? The covering over it is thinner. It's like, the oven glove has a hole in it. So like, ooh, ouch, that's... that mashal is very important and very powerful to understand, because whenever we engage with Kedusha, there's a little bit of trepidation. There's a little bit, okay, we are facing HaKadosh Baruch Hu now. Right? There's what to understand, that we're standing in a place of Kedusha. And that requires a different modus operandi, a different way of engaging with ourselves, with the world, with our HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because now we're in a place that's a little bit different, which is why whenever there is Kedusha, there is Isur, there is the minimizing of the self in order to be able to experience Kedusha without messing that up. The inappropriate treating of Kedusha is a problem, right? It's a problem if a person would take something that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash and use it inappropriately. That's called Me'ila, right? You are being Meil B'Kodesh. You are taking something away from the world of Kedusha. And if a person would, meaning this is the Gemara's in Yuma, if a Kohen Gadol would have inappropriate thoughts even in the Kodesh HaKodashim, so that is Misa B'dei Shemayim, right? Because at that point, in that place, when you are that connected to the source of all things in the world of Kedusha, well, hold up a second, you can't mess that up. So that becomes frightening. So we take steps back, which is why the world of Chol that we engage in on a day-to-day basis is an oven glove, right? It is for us to be able to handle the world that Hashem has put us in, because we're living in a world of Chataim. We mess up from time to time. So engaging with Kedusha is thus frightening. It's a terrifying thing to engage in the world of Kedusha all the time. And you see this mafurish in the Torah many, 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 many times. The moment that Adam HaRishon sins, what does he do? Runs and hides, right? He runs and hides because Kedusha is something that is terrifying. Moshe Rabbeinu is standing at the snare. He's afraid. He's afraid to look.
No, you mean because he had no clothes on.
But he has no shoes on, Moshe Rabbeinu. Right, Moshe Rabbeinu has clothes on. Adam HaRishon doesn't have clothes on. But I mean, we're not going to get into all the parshanut of Adam and Chava. But you find the same thing that when Klal Yisrael experience this mass revelation at Har Sinai, they say to Moshe Rabbeinu, hold up a second, can you do it instead of us? Because we're afraid that we're all going to die, right? Meaning there is a terror in engaging with, we see this whenever people in Tanakh see a Malach Hashem, so I'm going to die as a result of the fact that I've seen the Malach. There is a terrifying encounter when one engages with Kedusha. In Eretz Yisrael, the sludge is thinner. Now, we'll explain what that mashal means if we have a little bit more time, maybe next week, exactly what that means. For those that have been listening a little bit to the Sefer Yoshua Shiurim, we dealt with this in the Ramban in a number of places, where the Ramban describes exactly what Elohim Acherim means and versus Elokei Haaretz and Elohim Neichar. There's a lot to understand, but we'll sum it up very, very briefly. When we are in Eretz Yisrael, we engage with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a more direct level than in Chutz La'aretz. Which means that the nature of the Jewish people, and this is Rav Kook's point here, which is to experience life as connected to Hashem as much as possible, is experienced more in Eretz Yisrael than anywhere else. That's the uniqueness of the relationship between Klal Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. Now we're going to define what that means here. Being in Eretz Yisrael, says Rav Kook, is a machshir. Is a machshir. What is a machshir? It's a preparation. We have many things in halacha that are machshirim. That's what we call in halacha a hechsher mitzvah. A hechsher mitzvah. For example, is there a mitzvah to build a sukkah? No. So is there a mitzvah to build a sukkah? No. There is a mitzvah to sit in a sukkah. If you never built a sukkah in your life, you can be mekayim all of the mitzvahs of sukkahs. Taryag mitzvahs you can fulfill without ever building a sukkah. Now, yes, it's true, and Rosh likes to talk about this whenever he speaks about machshiri mitzvah and building sukkah in particular. Netziv, he points out that there is something called a hechsher mitzvah akasa b'Torah. Right? There's machshiri mitzvah that are mentioned in the pasuk says Chag sukkah is ta'as halacha. So the Gemara learns sukkah is ta'as halacha, that you should build sukkahs from the refuse of your Yaakov and your Garin. Okay. But there is no mitzvah to build a sukkah. That's called a hechsher mitzvah. Is there a mitzvah to sit in a sukkah? Yes. Is there a mitzvah to wear tzitzis? Yes, if you're wearing a full-corner garment, right? That is called a hechsher mitzvah. Well, that's called a mitzvah kiyumis, not a mitzvah chiyuvis. It is a mitzvah that you can fulfill. You are not obligated to do unless you're wearing a full-corner garment. Are you obligated to tie tzitzis? No, you can buy tzitzis that you didn't tie, right? forever, right? You can do that. You can do that. Is there a mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah? Yes, that's a mitzvah. That's taka a mitzvah. That's not a hechsher mitzvah. That's a chiyuv. You should write a Sefer Torah. So why is it that there are far more people in the world that write that tie their own tzitzis than write their own Sefer Torah? Because you're going to have a shliach write the Sefer Torah for you. But that's called shlichus. You are having somebody else fulfill a mitzvah on your behalf, as opposed to tying tzitzis, which is a hechsher mitzvah. Is there a mitzvah of wearing tefillin? Yes. Is there a mitzvah of making your own tefillin? No. That's a hechsher mitzvah. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting. Remember Rabbi Blachman points this out to guys whenever they talk about, what their career plans are. This is an important thing to understand. The Torah has an obligation for people to wear tefillin, right? Men over the age of 13 need to wear tefillin. But I don't have tefillin, so I'm an oines, right? Don't have tefillin, so I'm ba'oines. Yes? I don't have tefillin. I woke up, day after my bar mitzvah, I don't have tefillin. So go buy a pair. I don't have money. So the obligation is as follows. There is a chiyuv as follows. Either find an animal, learn shchita. Maybe you don't need shchita for tefillin. Okay, let's make like that. Right? It could be a novella, in theory. Right? But get a cow. Learn how to shecht it. Learn how to treat the hide. Learn how to turn that into parchment. Learn saffras. Acquire yourself some ink and a quill and write down the parashas. Learn how to write down the parashas and make yourself a pair of tefillin. That is option A. Option B is buy it. Buy a pair of tefillin. But I don't have money to buy a pair of tefillin. So I'm saying, that you could find, maybe, right? You had a non-domesticated animal, behemoth daka, right? Find such a thing. It's right, possible from Hefker. So all go out and figure out how to, fish, and then earn a living by fishing and take that money to a sofer and buy tefillin. Meaning, oines does not mean, I don't have tefillin, so I'm not going to put in tefillin. No. Part of the obligation, built into the obligation of putting on tefillin, is figuring out how to acquire a pair of tefillin. That's part of it. That is part of it. Correct. In a Chanami. I don't want to insult any of the Chabadnikim, but for most of Jewish history, there weren't Chabad houses. You know that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know this is recorded. I know maybe people are going to get upset with me. Right? I have to be mataritz. There should have been. Right? It would have been better, yes, for sure. It would have been better for Klal Yisrael. There would have been Chabad houses for the last 2,000 years, but they weren't. It took the Alter Rebbe and a lot to happen in order for there to be Chabad houses. But right, exactly, right. But it took a long time, and it took a long time before you could go to Honolulu and find a Chabad house with a pair of tefillin. If you're a Jew that lives in Honolulu, figure out how to get a pair of tefillin. That's called the Hechsher Mitzvah. Eretz Yisrael is the machshir. Is the machshir for the nation being what we need to become. Without being in Eretz Yisrael, none of what we need to become is possible. We can do things like it, we can do things that are akin to it, but in order to live in Eretz Yisrael, in order to be Am Hashem, you need to be in Eretz Yisrael as a nation. Without that, we cannot have that. Eretz Yisrael is the machshir, and that's how Rav Kook writes here. He machshira es ha'am ha'yoshev aleh b'nachlas olamim. Makes us part of that vision of an eternal Jewish people that is going to make a difference in the world, that is going to fulfill the vision of Avraham Avinu of being a grassroots movement, yakiru v'yedu kol yeshvei sevel, ki l'chasichra kol berach tishava kol loshen. That the entirety of the world is going to one day recognize that there is a Borei Olam. That is the mission statement of the Jewish people. To make that happen, that is impossible without being in Eretz Yisrael. That is impossible without being in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore he writes as follows, and we're going to explain what that means if we have time in a couple of moments. He says, Nishmas ha'uma v'ha'aretz, the soul of both the land and the nation, yachtav palas es yisaid havayason, bring into the world of activity the foundation of their existence, the reason that we are. Tov ois es tafkidam, we have the ability to fulfill our mission. Lahotzi el hapoel es arigas kedushasam bishnas shabbatan, to be able to bring into reality the interwovenness of the kedusha of the nation and the land, specifically during Shemitah. Ha'am poel b'koicha hanafshi al haaretz. The nation is poel b'koicha hanafshi al haaretz, means we exert our individual uniqueness on the land of Israel. Zraya Hashem misgala al yidei hashvasai ha-ruchanis, and Hashem's providence and interest in the Jewish people is expressed in our being in Eretz Yisrael during Shemitah. Va'aretz po'elas al ha'am lahachshir es tchunasai, and then the land acts upon the people to bring out our basic nature, lichfi chefetz chaim elokim shlemim betav nisam, so that that which we are supposed to be can be fulfilled. Now, we'll say this very, very, very quickly. This is a tremendous insight of the Ramban. You'll see this in Parshas Lech Lecha, and in Parshas B'chukosai, and in Parshas Kisova, and in a number of other places. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu describes the promise of being in Eretz Yisrael, of being an Am Hashem, of being this nation that is going to represent godliness in the world, my dear sweet and holy friends, what is the reward of keeping the mitzvahs? What's the reward? Being close to Hashem? No. Nope. Rain. Rain. Not just rain, but healthy crops. Not just healthy crops, always healthy crops. Not just healthy crops, and not just always healthy crops, and not just rain in the right time, but also that all of our cattle and livestock will be healthy and there will never be miscarriages. Everything will just turn out amazing. And that everybody will have healthy children always. No miscarriages, Rahman al-Islam. No developmental disabilities and delays. Everything amazing. Gewaldig. That is the promise of the Torah for keeping the mitzvahs, is living in Eretz Yisrael under the Hashgachas Habayre, which is everything works out. You know what that means? It means getting into your car in the morning to go to work and green lights all the way every day forever. No car crashes, just everything in sync, working perfectly. Perfect. Now, is that a miracle? So this, my dear friends, is not a nes nigla. It is not an open miracle. It is not the splitting of the Red Sea. It is not man falling from heaven. It is a statistical anomaly, right? It is at the furthest end of the bell curve. Is it impossible that you will have everybody just healthy and well and working well and things great? No, it's not impossible. It's just super duper improbable. This is what the Ramban describes as a nistar, hidden miracles. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not breaking the rules of nature. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is just optimizing the rules of nature for everybody simultaneously for an extended period of time called forever. That's the promise. That is the promise of Geula. According to the Torah, you'll come to Eretz Yisrael, you keep the mitzvahs, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of everything. Right? Now that is something that if we do this right, and the rest of the world looks at this, seeing that everything is amazing and perfect all the time for Klal Yisrael, that like anybody that comes to war against us, we go beep, and then the war ends, right? They disappear. just miraculously, but not breaking the rules of nature. Just everything works out all the time. It's on that Moshe Rabbeinu says, Rak am chacham v'navayin hagoy hagadol hazeh. Wow. Wowee, look at that. Maybe we should do what these guys are doing because it seems to be working pretty gosh darn nicely. What are you guys doing? Oh, we're of the Hashem. Oh, that's interesting. What does that mean? Welcome to Yiddishkeit, right? That's the goal. That is the optimized way for Klal Yisrael to live. That's the optimized way for humanity to live. That's what we're aiming for. That's the eventual goal. Now, it is possible that that could then be hidden, could be concealed behind Jewish genius. The brilliance of high tech, startup nation, all of the aspects of industry and creativity that we're going to say, these, Kluge Yidden, they figured out how to do these marvelous, wonderful things. They've got some secret, elders of Zion, some protocol somewhere. They control the news and the weather and the government and all the rest of it, right? It's like a friend of mine, one of my chaverim in Kermiyavne, said that he liked reading the Arabic newspapers. I said to him, why do you like reading Arabic newspapers? So he says, because if you read the Jewish newspapers, you hear all about the people that are like in poverty and the shidduchim that are broken and the almanas that are raising money for tzedakah. You read the Arabic newspapers, the Jews control the money and the weather and the government and the world. He says it's good for my ego. It's a wonderful thing. It's a meridic thing to read the Arabic newspapers. I feel very good about myself, right? So people are going to look at the Jewish people and go, what's this? They've got some chokhmah that whatever. It's not because they're of the Hashem. Until Shemitah arrives. You know what happens in Shemitah? All bets are off. You didn't say, no, we're going to put a pause on the economy. We're just going to hang out and go to the Beis Medrash. We're going to learn. We're going to daven. We're going to be of the Hashem. And look, we're not worried. Because everything that we do is al pi Hashem. Al pi Hashem yachanu ve'al pi Hashem yisol. That's life as a Yid. And if that's life as a Yid, well, then, whoa. Now the nature of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's interaction with the land has a tremendous hashpa'ah on the people. It makes us an Am Segula. And the Am Segula now realizes that from within this land comes HaKadosh Baruch Hu's unique relationship with us. And this, my dear friends, is the beginning of the return to Gan Eden. That's what Rav Kook is describing here. Is the relationship between the nation and the land now fulfills that promise of what we are supposed to do in the most profound way. And that is something, Be'ez Hashem, that we will continue next week.